Today I have the pleasure to introduce you to Hudson Bilo, who is a Catholic speaker and who has consulted for Jason Everett, Dr. Janet E. Smith, Catholic Answers, and Life Team, and was recently featured on a DVD produced by Ascension Press. Through his own story and experiences, he approaches the heartfelt and sensitive topic of gender and sexuality in a way that he hopes will inspire people to look deeper into what the Church has to offer. Please give a round of applause to Mr. Hudson.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. There we go. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll get to that later here. I'm really happy and humbled to be here, you guys. First of all, I went to visit that relic last night, and then the Holy Spirit was like, you got to change your whole talk. And I was like, oh. So I didn't exactly change it, but it definitely made me go through it again. So you guys are getting a brand new, fresh talk that was crafted just for you. Always is the case, but this one's extra special by the Midnight Oil, okay? Yes, there you go. That's for you. All right. And just if we could just open with a quick prayer in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now at the hour of our death. Amen. All right. Thank you. So just a couple of quick notes here. Ultimately, I respect you guys too much to sit up here and tell you what to think about things. So what I'm going to do is invite you to journey with me as I wander through some of the things that I had to come to realize on my journey home back to the Catholic Church through this topic, gender ideology, sexuality, that whole bit, so that we can kind of say what happened. You know, how does someone go from out there to come back home to the church? And my story is not the same as everybody's story, and I acknowledge that, but I do know that pieces of my story are very common to a lot of people. So I'm not the only person who has dealt with some of these things, so I'm hoping that this can be some tools for you guys, okay? And also to provide a glimpse of the complexity of this topic. It's not just a matter of, well, I like this idea or way of thinking. This is much deeper than ideas, okay? And obviously in such a short time, we're just not going to be able to cover all, so just let's take what we can, and maybe it'll be an invitation to dig deeper in time. Okay. Some of the things I'm going to share, I confess I was quite prepared to take to the grave, okay? So just if I ask for your prayers, and if there's something that I say that's challenging to you, I ask for double prayers, okay? And everything I do share ultimately is to magnify God and not me, okay? So all glory be to him. So let's get started. There we go. So as indicated by maybe the title and what I kind of just said, same-sex attractions and transgender inclinations are both part of my story. Yet somehow I'm here in the Catholic Church, the last place the world says that I should be, right? So what happened? There must be more to the story. And that's kind of like the basic that we don't start with. There must be more to the story. Let's ask a bigger question. Well, I was running around living my own life, which I'll explain a little bit, and then I encountered a group of Catholic people, some who had a history through CCO and whatnot, and these people had a peace that I enjoyed, that I just craved, because my life was a little tumultuous at the time. And they were like gentle catalysts on my journey home into the mystery of the faith. They received me where I was, and they walked with me towards greater holiness, and that's what accompaniment really means, holiness. And ultimately I found out that I could belong here, and that the Catholic Church was a place for me. That's the end of the talk. I'm kidding, of course. Anyway. Yeah. Anyway, the whole world at the time, I mean, when I was navigating all this, the whole world seemed to say, want me to say, you're gay, this is who you are, and all that kind of thing, or you're trans and this is who you are. And there's this implication that was the only way that I could ever experience self-honesty. And but that didn't jive with one of the very first truths that I had learned about myself, and I discovered, which was this. It's about everybody, actually. Something we don't specifically choose is not the same as something we do specifically choose in any facet of life. And so things like the attractions or inclinations that I was experiencing, I knew I had to keep distinct from my embraced identity. Just to time out for a second, I can make this slideshow available to everybody, so instead of burning through notes, which is great, I would invite you to just kind of wander with me through here. I'll get this into your hands, okay? So don't worry about that. But anyway, so this was the foundation. I said, this is true. Where can I find this truth? Because, I mean, I was burnt out. I just needed some truth in my life. And it was a matter of greater self-honesty that I had to reject the idea that experiencing attraction necessitated that I say, this is who I am, or that's who I am. It didn't become an automatic after I came to understand this. So that truth kind of changed everything. And it got me thinking, since I didn't want to be the gay kid, and in terms of identity, it meant I didn't have to be anymore. And some people actually give me grief for that. They say you hate yourself and you're born that way and you're trying to run and I just got to ask that you to respect that was part of my journey. I didn't want that at the time. But in that mindset of this is who I am and who I forever must be, because I was attached to it, I had bought into the falsehood that I'd have to give up being a father and a husband too. And in effect, that mindset, I realize now, stole many years of my life from that vocation, that potential vocation. I wasn't open to it because I didn't see myself as possible. I didn't see it as possible. And of course, I know that God can use all the years of our lives for his service. Maybe that's why I'm here. But anyway, all this stuff was rooted in how I saw myself as a person. It was my perception. Anyway, this realization that I could have a life outside of being the gay kid, it was a window of hope. Fast forward to 2008. I'm at this teachers' conference, and I met a very, very high-level sexual minority activist. This guy's written government policy in certain provinces, all that kind of stuff. And he told me to my face after his seminar that environment plays a factor in the development of our attractions. And that really stuck with me. First of all, why didn't he say that during the seminar? And the second thing was an awareness of environment. It's like, well, I'm not powerless in terms of my environment. As with the slide, it's definitely related. See, here's the idea. There's a lot of ideas in the pool we swim in about this whole topic. There's a lot of ideas in the pool, in the culture, in the church, everything like that. But I always found it interesting that not every idea gets the same amount of airtime, okay? In particularly, such as the idea told to me by that activist himself, that environment plays a factor in the development of our attractions. Why don't we hear about that on TV or anywhere, really? Anyway, I thought about what he said, and I looked into my own environment and asked myself, why am I the way I am, you know? And there's nothing wrong with a little self-reflection, right? That's all it was. And over years of praying about this, we're talking, I came to these seven points that kept coming up. I bet you guys didn't know I was going to have a topless shot in here, did you? Okay. Anyway. So these 7 points kept bubbling up. That's me, the little guy. Number 1, I learned to be second place. Throughout my earliest memories, I have a loving family, an amazing brother, but he's 3 years stronger than me, 3 years older than me. Guess who won everything that we ever did together? You see what I'm saying? So in that, I learned to be second place. Part of that, I came to believe that I wasn't good enough to be first place. I wasn't good enough in what came to understand was boy things. Things that I associated with boy was everything that my brother did, and I never came in first. Therefore, in my reasoning, I wasn't good at being a boy. Being a boy was a source of failure. Clear? Next one. When I was 9, I lost my best friend. He moved to Ontario, actually. This is the days before texting and all that stuff. Never saw him again. And I remember crying for 3 days. What happened after that is I remember not opening my heart to friendship with other boys after that. I was really heartbroken. Like, we hung out all the time, you know? Terrorized the neighborhood, the whole bit. Around the same age, 9, I was exposed to porn for the first time. And this drew me into a deep isolation. So first of all, I'm building walls around my heart because of not wanting to taste that loss. Like, I never wanted to taste that heartbreak again. And now I'm building walls, and now I'm turning into myself by using porn, furthering the isolation. And guess how does that turn out with building relationships, right? It makes it even harder to build healthy relationships. So by point 3 here, I'm already, turning into myself and distancing myself from the boys through choices that I was making too. Number 4, I like girly things. Well, this might be connected to number 1, is that the things that I perceived that were boy were sources of you're not good enough. They were sources of you're not good enough. Well, I don't know any kid that wants to live a life thinking that they're not good enough. So you gravitate to things that you're decent at. And if they're not boy things, they must be girl things. And a lot of those things were girly things, the only thing that wasn't girly is that I actually started cheering for the Montreal Canadiens because my brother was an Oilers fan, so I tried to, that's the one thing I hadn't forgiven myself for either. Everything else is fine. But, it was the softer play, the softer, just the less competition. All these things were pointing to not having to experience that trauma of not being good enough, not measuring up. Number 5. There was a scary movie that we played in grade 3 at school. That's something that would never happen now. This was off the charts. And I was sitting there beside one of my guy friends, and it was a super scary part. And I ended up turning into him and huddling into his chest. Okay? Now that's what kids do when they're scared, right? But here I am, a little boy, huddling into the chest of my friend, and I remember feeling safe. And I remember really liking the relief from the fear that I had. So there I am, 8 years old now, finding safety in the arms of a man. Okay, add this to the stack of things, right? The 6th one, hockey bullying. I was bullied relentlessly in the hockey arena kind of thing. And I wonder if this had to do with them sniffing out that I had no masculine confidence already at this point. Look at the things that had happened already. I didn't see myself as having value as a boy. And kids, if you just look at a playground, that's society in 5 seconds, right? And they saw that, and I was terrorized for that in ways that were not as bad as some people, but still impacting. And I remember kind of thinking, I don't like boy. I don't like boy things. I don't like how these boys are. I don't want anything to do with boy. So a further wedge. And the last one, Valentine's Day. So back in the 80s, people would give Valentine's Day cards in classes, right? Some people remember.
Yes, we do.
Yes, that's right. Well, they stopped that because what about the kid who doesn't get any Valentine's? Well, one year, grade 3 again, I was a kid who didn't get any Valentines. So not only was it hey, I don't think I really fit in with these boys. I don't want to be around these boys. I was gravitating towards the girls because it was a source of as an escape from the trauma from the boys, and now I'm dealing with the question of why doesn't anyone want to love me? Yeah. So think of all that stuff weighing on a heart. Okay. So in terms of how I felt, it was kind of like this. The guy on the left, the fish here. Like I said, I had a happy childhood, but my idea of success was pegged on my understanding of what it meant to be a boy, which was completely formed by what my brother was good at. And I was trying to be him. That was an impossible standard. I can't be someone else. But I felt like this lone fish, even though my family did make me feel like I belonged and I was loved. But I like this picture because this isn't just well-trained fish. There's an actual wall between them, okay? A little glass wall. And it reminds me how my decisions contributed to that wall. I'm not playing some kind of victim card here. All of this was founded on my perceptions of reality as a child. Have you ever seen this picture before? There's a toast with shark and Lego on it? Okay. Well, it's titled Father's Day Breakfast, and the caption was, "My kids made me this for Father's Day breakfast." And I like this picture because it just goes to highlight how in my life and the lives of many children, our perceptions are a little off, okay? Yes, we can observe things very well, but our reasoning is out. And some people say, what about that kid knows for sure this and that. I'm like, yes, it's true that my friend's 2 kids got sick. One drank red Powerade, the other drank blue Powerade. They barfed, and they said, look, we made purple. They can do that. They can understand. They can understand and observe. But one of those kids, about a week later, said, I asked, hey, so what's the answer to 10 plus 10? And she said, Jesus. Okay? So the point is that reasoning, can we really trust the reasoning of a child? The observations, yes, they're important, but it's different than reasoning. That's what I'm saying. It's different than reasoning. And my reasoning when I was that age was probably just as inaccurate, but yet that formed my entire trajectory of life. Okay? I can unpack that now looking back thanks to the invitation of that gay activist guy, actually. So it's funny how God works. Anyway, this is supposed to be a black slide, so that's normal, okay? Over time, I continued to avoid the boys and grow with the girls. We're talking like grade 1, 2, 3 here again. And you know how you become more like who you hang out with? Well, that was happening to me too. So I was becoming more and more feminized, more like the girls, mannerisms, passive temperament, all that stuff matched my interest activities anyway, because that was counter to the trauma that I knew I would taste if I started mixing with the boys. And it wasn't like the fault of anyone, it just sort of how it unfolded, and it just felt regular, you know? And all of that stuff, the feminization thing, validated me as a person that maybe I had some worth, because I couldn't find worth in being a boy. And so I became more and more attached to this idea of being a girl. But what that really was being attached to the idea of being not boy. Get that? So now into my teens here. I discovered cross-dressing in my early teens, which first started as a curiosity. And then actually, I can look back now and see how it was the tightness of the clothes that actually simulated a hug that I really, really craved. I just wanted to feel loved and to be held. And that cross-dressing for me and that continued feminization was a form of self-medicating to escape the pain and the trauma that I experienced, which distanced me from being a boy, and thus distanced me from the trauma associated with that thought. And the weird thing is, through all this, I still wanted to belong with the boys, and I desired to be validated with the boys, but I had no idea how to even start that. They were over there and I was over here. I just didn't know how to build that bridge. So as I grew older, that pursuit of validation turned into unchaste pursuits with women to prove that I was straight and to them, to everybody, including myself. And I mean, the first time I came out to myself, I was 11. And it was after 2 years of using porn from the Walmart flyers, by the way, so you never know what's going to be a trigger. And I just knew that I was bored of it. I wasn't getting high off the ladies on the page, so clearly what's an 11-year-old going to think? I guess I'm gay. Well, I said it to myself. I didn't know what it meant at the time. But I knew something was different. And of course, all this I kept a secret because I feared that if I said something, then no one would love me. And I had already been craving that idea of being loved. Even though I knew my parents loved me, it was different kind of I don't know what it was. It was different. I feared no one would love me, and it wasn't about the idea that, they wouldn't love me if I experienced same-sex attractions or if I was gay. It was actually the fact, I feared that they wouldn't love me because I was using people. I knew that using the porn was not good. I knew that I was using people at that age. And I had little self-control and little impulse control. I still have to practice on that today, of course. For example, I stole 3 chocolates from one of those tables instead of 5. Okay? It's all the little things, okay? So anyway, I continued to distance myself from the boys, and they became more of a mystery to me. And to me, they were the other. And as I awoke to my desires to have someone special, I thought it might be to be with a boy romantically, because they were my complement, you know? I was like the girls already. I didn't need a girl because I was like the girls already. So in terms of like emotional and like sociability and stuff like that. So I perceived that they were what I wasn't. And along this trajectory, it probably didn't help that I was molested by a man when I was in my teens, okay? And what happened in that case is the body had physical reaction. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gay, like again, and all these memories flooded in again. Of course, I know now, like, a teenage boy could rub up against a cactus and, you know, things would happen. It just, the guys are laughing because you know it's true. It's just it's a physiological thing. It's our bodies are growing, you know. But anyway, I froze in that, and I had that reaction. So again, as a teen, like, what else did I conclude other than it meant I was gay? And that only made me want to escape myself more. So by this time, I was years into unchaste pursuits with women, quite sexually active. I thought it was normal because that's what kids think. What they're doing is normal. And after that point, it accelerated way out of control because I had to run even harder, right? So I had to run harder, so my behaviors became way more crazy and eccentric. I went through women really fast and hurt a lot of people along the way, I'm sorry to say. And the thing is, I thought they were the problem. Like, why can't, I thought I was quite the catch. That's how deluded I was. I thought it was them. Typical of addiction, right? Project outwards, right? And it was also terrifying to have the light shone on the pattern of behavior I was in, because I didn't want to see it. So that was me. I would lash out at people, even if they lovingly challenged me, because I didn't want to see the truth. Today I appreciate that these people said something instead of nothing, because I couldn't mistake their silence for approval. Okay? Their challenge to me was gentle and in the context of relationship, and I only really gave them the time and heard them out, so to speak, because I already trusted them and I knew that they cared about me. And even then, I still pretty much rejected everything they said. But at least I tried to listen. But the point is, I was rarely disarmed. And by the grace, all that began to unravel on one particular day when Taylor Swift entered my life. Yes, the Taylor. It was around the time of Teardrops on My Guitar, back in the day. And so my cousin and I are driving probably to a bar, and he kind of jokingly talks at the radio. He's like, Taylor, maybe it's you, because all our songs are about breakups, right? So we kind of had a good laugh. And then, but who would have thought that moment would be like a game changer? For the first time in my life, I looked and said, oh my God, maybe all these breakups and everything's relational disaster. Maybe I should look at me. Maybe, just maybe. Who would have thought? God can use everything, right? Everything. Shortly after that, just a couple years after, 2 years after that, a friend of mine, so Facebook came out, right? And a friend of mine goes, hey, what's your deal? All your friends on Facebook are women. And I was like, I am a big stud. Clearly there is nothing to talk about here. But I kind of went and internalized their thoughts and looked at it, and it's true, they were. And the only guys, except for maybe one or two from work, the only men that I had on my Facebook were before the incidents of being molested. So, and I was like, okay, I know that's something's wrong with that. You know what I mean? I wasn't really much into my faith back then, but even I could tell that wasn't right. And then, quick question: is there any dog people here? Like people like dogs and stuff. Okay, how about this? How about people who aren't comfortable with dogs? It's okay. Don't be shy. Okay. So the dog people, you all know people who aren't dog people. What happens if you put a dog in a non-dog person's lap? No, you're just saying no. What happens? It looks kind of like this, hey? Okay? So that's not me in the picture, by the way. But that's how it felt when, around that time of the Facebook thing, I got a man hug from a guy in a totally cool, appropriate environment, and I realized when I responded like this, I didn't know what to do, that I didn't know how to hug a man. And I also knew that there's something up with that. Why don't I know how to respond to a man? And that kind of helped unearth the real trust issues that I had never even thought about before. And when you get molested by a dude, you're going to have trust issues, right? There's probably lots of other reasons as well. But I began to realize I needed some healing, some actual legit healing. And I could hug my dad and my brother, but that was different. Like, I knew them my whole life, So it's just different. I just needed to look at myself and figure out what was going on. So as a school teacher, though, you learn a lot about neurons and how people think and how behaviors impact our brains, okay? So I realized that, to an extent, I had been forming myself in ways due to my behavioral choices. You know, you practice the piano, you're going to modify your brain. This is neuroscience 101, and you can look anywhere. I would consider this common knowledge, not some bizarre study. And neurologically, I began to realize there was unintended negative after effects. Okay, now this sounds crazy, but let's talk about porn, for example. The unintended negative after effects of using porn, I mean, nobody wants to feel bad and isolated and go down these roads where they're looking at things they never thought they'd ever look at. But these are some of the after effects because the brain starts dripping this chemical drop and says, you need to get high again and again and again. We don't choose that, but you choose the action, right? It's kind of like, or if you go outside and play in the sun, there's your choice, but you get a sunburn. That wasn't your choice, but it arose out of your actions. Get it? Okay? So my brain was being formed by my choices, but it was being formed in ways that I wasn't really asking for it. But our brains get formed in accordance to how we use them in thoughts and behavior. And that drew me to finally understand that I'm not helpless. I'm not a victim here. And I do have the ability to create my environment to some degree, especially between my ears, the environment between here, through my choices in thought and behavior. And since the brain is the biggest sex organ, so too do my choices influence my facets of sexuality. Was I allowed to say that at a CCO? Any confession right away. Anyway, so I'm not saying that people specifically choose the attractions they experience, but I am saying that our choices still matter, and because our choices form our environment. Again, a good example of this is the brain scientist's testimony to the Senate in the United States in 2004, which they talk about that chemical trail drip. And I can provide you guys this information and the PDF of this thing. In simple terms, though, like, you know, we talk about thoughts and behaviors and what's going to win, because, I mean, that was a big thing for us to learn as we were coming home to the church. This is the thing, is that we're not victims, and we do have an ability to influence our everyday going forward. Think of it this way. If two dogs are battling it out, you've probably heard this fable or story, you know, and someone says, well, which dog is going to win? And the dog that wins is the one that you feed, right? So if you feed the dog of porn, it's going to be easier to just fall to that. But if you feed the dog of magnanimous chastity, it'll be much easier to choose that over time because that's the dog you're feeding. Okay? That's kind of what it all boiled down to, that realization that what I do and think matters. Anyway, at the time, though, I was pretty much making choices to run and escape myself in many ways. And I basically lived in fear in many ways, again. But I knew that to move past the hurt and brokenness and basically reclaim my life from the dark side, I would have to face myself, and I would have to break out of my safe space. I would have to break out of safe spaces. Many people, like myself, have come home have gone through that awakening that's saying, I needed to face those things I didn't want to face. Some of it was because of a bit of a bottoming out, like in my case. But it was also because there was people like you waiting for us with an olive branch, ready to love us back to life. I like this one, not because we're going to watch some Flintstones, but in my safe space, I never could have grown as a person the way I have. Kind of like how palm trees are strengthened in a hurricane. I needed to face my storm. Around the time of this dog hug story, I came out to myself a third time. Again, black on purpose. I was regularly watching same-sex male porn, transgender porn at this point. I'd even looked into surgery. I'm serious, like those kinds. I was like, I'm not a boy, I just can't do this stuff. I just couldn't run anymore. And today, of course, I know how sexual appetite is influenced by the exposure to pornography. Like you said, you look at things you never dreamed you'd look at. But anyway, when I said that this is who I am, it was like entering a pit of despair. It was horrible. And not to mention the fear of having to tell my family. So I have tasted that fear, you know. And I understand why people run from it. It's terrifying, or experience great anxiety over it. Okay, but I don't live in that space anymore. I know God has greatly blessed me, and this is one of those things that the Holy Spirit was like, put this in. Okay, my family knows what I'm doing today, and this here is this is an email I got last night from my dad. So yeah, it took years to get here. But it meant a lot coming from him, and I share this to underscore the value of a father's blessing along one's journey. And I wonder how many people who are in my shoes are deprived of that angle of healing because of abandonment or death or whatever. And so I wonder, perhaps some of us here could be that foster father through authentic friendship. Let's shift gears. Dad joke. Okay. All right. So that is me and my grandfather there, and a beautiful car in the back. It's the same car as that one when I had my topless picture earlier, right? The 1975 Beauty 20-footer. So what kind of car is this? Would you say a red car? Or a 1975 Ford LTD V8 400 two-door pillared hardtop? Catch that? Okay. So this is where people will say, well, it depends. It depends what someone's ready to understand. Like, to a 5-year-old, it's a red car, right? It depends what someone's ready for. But the question is bigger than that. It's, would you willfully participate in preventing someone from coming to understand the greater truth of that car? Would you willfully participate in suppressing the truth that is, in fact, a 1975 Ford LTD V8 400 two-door pillared hardtop? Like, would you participate in hiding that by using stunted language, by using red car? You see where I'm going with this? Would you try to make it so someone could never see beyond red car? Even if they were dissatisfied with, well, red car's not enough. Well, it's just a red car. That's who it is. Well, when people wanted to force the gay identity onto me and use unclarified language, like speaking like gay and straight or trans alone, like, what does it mean? Attractions or identity? It can't be unchosen and chosen at the same time. We need clarity. But when that was imposed onto me, along with the narrative, that would have kept me at red car. And that would have kept me in the despair that I was harboring. And it was awful. But within that language of red car only, I couldn't even become aware of seeing myself outside that lens. Within the language of everybody is gay or straight or trans or somewhere in between, I couldn't come to see myself in terms of proper Catholic anthropology, which is, first and foremost, beloved child of God, who experiences whatever, but is beloved child of God first. That would have been deprived of me. That only came to be after the whole tide of language became lifted. You probably noticed that 10 years ago, this topic was spoken about very differently. There was nobody talking about identity and experience, right? The tide has been lifted, and that's been good, a new awareness. We got to keep lifting. Anyway, within that language, before this tide shifted, I was becoming more like this, okay? So let me explain. These are obviously square watermelons. You know, just everyday business. You grow these by putting them in a plexiglass box. You put a baby watermelon, it grows into the parameters that you place around it. Well, those types of identity labels, you're gay or straight or trans, and I tried to come to fruition in each one of them. Those were my box, those were my parameters, and all I was doing was filling that and staying there. And those also influenced my perspectives, right? Influenced my perspective and my expectations of what I ought to do to be happy. And like I said, when I embraced those labels, I thought I had to do certain things to be happy, okay? But those boxes were formed by an inhibited language. They were formed by red car, okay? But language does matter. I mean, it influences our expectation. Now we get to Yoda. So the short story is, you can put the pieces together on this one. There was a woman who, at her workplace who got walked out to the parking lot with a blindfold on. She thought she was going to win a new car, and then they gave her this because she thought she wanted a Toyota. This is a real story, people. I'm not making this up. I couldn't dream this up. So I think it would be safe to say that her expectations, she was not happy. Her expectations were formed by language. Okay? And if we don't have a language to express concepts, like this is how we come home. We were able to start identifying and distinguishing these things and develop the language of the church. If we don't have language to express concepts, we won't be able to wrap our minds around the concept. I mean, that's why, like, school books, some of y'all are young enough to have been in school recently, they've got glossaries. Huh? Try learning a book of stuff without a glossary. Good luck, right? I mean, and out in Saskatchewan, where I'm from, where we're very familiar with, yeah. So we know what roadkill is, but what if there was somebody who came from some village where there was no roads, somewhere on another planet? Could they know what roadkill really was if they didn't have roads to understand roadkill? You know what I mean? It's kind of bizarre. Like, everyone knows what a road is. But just to think about that idea of concepts, we need clarity in the words. And if we don't have clarity, we get things like this. You get things like this. I like to order a cake with nothing on it. Okay? That was for you. We get this. We get heel burgers, instead of healthy burgers. Okay? It's filled with dad jokes here. Okay? But anyway, the clarity mattered. That's what helped draw us back home to the faith, that we could ask deeper questions and we could differentiate. And a lot of those people who were trying to keep me at Red Car and in that despair, saying all I could ever be is Red Car, all I could ever be is gay, and I could never be a husband or a father, all that kind of stuff, they were keeping me from the joy that I've come to experience by letting go and trusting God more fully. And I now see that my attachment to those identities, back when I was really attached to them personally, reflected that I didn't trust God, that he could give me more. And today I know that he can, and he does. Anyway, so on this, around the time of my third time coming out to myself, and that's when I met the good people like you, who first loved me and then invited me into the church despite where I was. And I hit rock bottom, and I thought I was there, but I hit another one, like those kind of things. They showed me that I was still worthy of love, and I still had value, and I still could belong in the Catholic Church. It started with their love for him. It started with their love for Christ, which radiated out of them to me. The imagery of the crucifix is powerful because his arms are open. And one priest in a confession, he said, look, his arms are open for all of you, even the parts that you don't want to see. And that was really moving. And all the while, my goal was never to change from gay to straight. It was never that. And the church isn't about that. And realizing that was very important for my openness to the church. Rather, it was to grow in, I found the church was drawing me to grow in deeper relationship with Christ, largely due to the CCO movement, okay, largely due to the Catholic movement who was anchored on virtue, okay? And in that, like I said, I feel like I've come alive again. And I've dropped the shame without picking up pride either. And come to know that, there is a hopeful future for me, And in the time before I become a husband and father, if that indeed would be befitting of what God wants of me, I'm still called to be husbandly and fatherly. That's powerful. I should be getting good at those first anyway. But I had to cooperate with God also by striving to put him first and make decisions that reflected that. So God planted that desire to continue to grow in holiness, motivated not by the rules of the church, but rather motivated by love for him. Kind of like when you're in confession and you're like, I'm confessing because I fear hell, instead of confessing because you want to restore a relationship with God. It's just a different motive. Both are okay, but one, restoring the love. And I always debate on sharing this, but I think it's very important. For me, incidentally, and others like me to varying degrees. And I know this. In fact, one of the fellows got married just like a few months ago. He's in his 50s. God bless him. But the more I pursued virtue, the heart of virtue, and the easier it was for me to pursue it, of course, because feeding the good dog. But the less I desired to lust. The temptations were still there, but the less I desired to cave in. And I was able to withstand that temptation. And the surprise result of this was, and this was a surprise, the same-sex sexual attractions diminished. And it drew me to realize retrospectively how deeply my same-sex sexual attractions were attached to lust. And also my inability to exercise self-control. Okay. Second thing, as I gained strength in practicing self-control and self-discipline, I became more confident as a man. And I found that through that, my same-sex romantic attractions, my fawning over the idea of belonging with another man, those diminished, possibly because I didn't see the other men as being my complement anymore. I had the masculine confidence now. I no longer needed a man. I was the man. Like, you know what I mean, okay? Like, I didn't need that as a compliment to me anymore. The third thing is I also found that through that, my desires to cross-dress and those deep transgender inclinations, which I had since my earliest memories, by the way, those things also diminished. And it happened alongside realizing that I had value and worth as a man. And I didn't need to escape being a man. I didn't need to escape the idea of being a boy, which of course were in that perception, that childhood perception that I could never be good enough or never measure up. For me, and several others like me that I know, my transgender pursuits were rooted in escapism. Okay, now this is very hard. You can't just go and say that. I can only share my story on this. And I know others who have that story, and they see that through the retrospective lens. They were me trying to escape those experiences I internalized while simply trying to find out where I belonged. All right, so wrap up the story part. I just want to focus on 5 key realizations here. Number 1, not all attractions and inclinations are sexual or romantic attractions and inclinations. This was key for me to understand so that I realized I didn't have to just like throw my heart all over the place. I could just recognize that it's okay for me to want to be around somebody. It doesn't imply sexual or romantic. You know, I mean, I think I grew up in the tail end where people could still have close best friends without having to face the question that maybe it means you're gay because you want to spend time with them. Like, I cannot imagine having to grow up today where those questions might be, you know, just insinuated by the culture. It's the culture who says that you should experiment, okay? And the culture, I think, knows that experimentation is probably going to feel pretty good. And when you have those good feelings, physiological feelings, or that finally that hug or that warmth, you're going to think, well, I guess maybe this is who I am, you know? I mean, it would help convince me if I was in that position. So anyway, the desire to be close to somebody doesn't mean you're anything. The desire to be, for me to be more inclined to do feminine stereotypical things doesn't mean anything. Like, I like event planning and aqua size. Hey, come on. That doesn't mean I'm this or that. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay? No, I mean, all seriousness, like, the deepest desires of my heart to belong as a girl still didn't change that. Like, 1,000 years later, when they dig up my body for sainthood, they're gonna find a male. They're gonna find a male's skeleton, and they're gonna identify that scientifically. I can't outrun that. And part of realizing that I can't outrun that was sort of like the time when I realized that I have this much life to give, this much energy, and I don't want to spend my life running from I don't want to spend my life fighting how I'm going to develop as a person. You know when you go see an old car like in the middle of the woods and it's got like trees growing through it and stuff like that? Like, nature can overtake old vehicles, which are made of metal, and nature is going to definitely take over a body made of flesh. Anyway, so another thing of these 5 things I want to talk about real quick here, I realized that And coming home, and a lot of us who have come home said, to say, like, this is who I am is just incomplete. It's just not enough, right? We talk about, you hear some speakers talking about it's just not enough to reflect the fullness and beauty of who you are as a person. I came to that conclusion probably on the way to McDonald's. But I thought about it like this. This is how my mind works. I thought about this. Okay, if this hamburger could talk after the bar, guys. Okay? If this hamburger could talk and it said, "I'm pickle," or "I'm gluten," or "I'm calories," you see, like, does any of those three things like harness the fullness and beauty of this hamburger? Does it? They're not enough, right? So too is it when I say I'm straight, or I'm trans, or I'm gay. It's just not enough. There's more to the fullness and beauty of who you are and who I am. So we're in Canada, so you guys have heard of mac and cheese? Yeah? This is the third thing I thought about. I always wondered, why don't they call it cheese and mac? Oh, wow. You know, there's laws about this, you guys. There's laws about ordering ingredients properly on food things. You know what I'm saying? The most primary ingredient comes first. Okay, so there's laws about this with food, then it matters. So I was wondering, what about the ingredients of us? Am I a sexuality with the person, or am I a person with the sexuality? You know what I'm saying? Like, who would have thought that macaroni and cheese would be so critical in someone's return to faith? Another part of my coming home, and several others who have come home, is being able to witness sexuality as gift, not commodity, okay? And today, because of the example, again, largely set by the people I know in the faith here, I don't throw my sexuality around anymore. I know that it's reserved for God. I've been pursuing holiness and chastity for about 7 years, preparing my heart for my future spouse. Ladies, just kidding. But all that stuff, you know, and just really honoring God, like, how can I serve you, you know? And I realized that holiness, though, it also, this is important, it means honoring and respecting the art of the divine artist, okay, what has been written into creation, independent of feelings, attractions, and inclinations, and behaviors. But this sexuality as gift thing, I think I'm going to explain it real quick. Because a lot of people don't understand why I would want to... Have you ever had that question? Like, why are you living chastely, right? Why are you living chastely? Why don't you, like, what's wrong with you? You know, you get those questions, especially around college, right? And so I think of it like this in understanding a gift to begin with. So does anyone like black licorice here? Yeah. Ugh. Okay. So you guys like okay, so I don't even know how to relate to you guys. So for the person who cannot stand black licorice, and you're like, hey, I just got black licorice at Halloween or whatever, and you give it away, how much of a gift is that? It's a terrible gift, right? There's no value to the gift, and there's not really any joy to give it, right? But as the gift becomes more valuable, it's more of a joy in giving it. I'm thinking like somewhere in the back of the Bible, there's that story about that widow who gives all she has kind of thing instead of from her excess. That could be the biblical angle, but if I knew more about the Bible, I would go there. Catholic things. Okay. But I ask usually I'm talking to students about this. I say, if you know me, I don't like black licorice, but I do love ketchup chips. Y'all like ketchup chips? Yeah. I love ketchup chips so much so that I was on a road trip and I found the perfect ketchup chip right there. It's just the perfect bite size. It's got the right amount of dust on it. Okay, perfect. So of course I saved it. Okay? And like if I was to give you this ketchup chip, then you know I love you. And you know that it's a gift. And it's a gift that matters. It's a gift that matters, and not only that, if I was to give you that gift, it's a serious cause for joy. I love to give a gift that matters to me. Okay? If that makes sense, the next question is, well, is our sexuality more important than a ketchup chip? Okay. See, something easily relatable to help people understand that giving the gift of your sexuality back to God is a beautiful gift. It's an important gift, but also it's a gift that produces great joy. And you'd never really know until you actually did it, right? It's one of those retrospective things, like, oh my gosh, I'm way more at peace. I'm way more at joy with doing that. All right, the fifth thing, I need you to sing with me on this one. If you're happy and you know it, clamp your hands. All right, so the point is, if we don't know the words to this song, will we ever fully understand what the song's about? Will we ever fully understand the song? Right? You can never fully understand unless we know the words to the song. Well, again, many of us have come home because we've come to learn the lyrics to the song of the church. Clarified language, making distinctions, all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to show you a couple distinctions in a little bit. But those lyrics really helped us understand the song of the church. And that, without those clarifications, I may have been left to continue thinking that the church rejected me as gay and then as trans, because I was there at one point. Or I might have been stuck in the despair of red car because I couldn't clarify my way past the decision to understand that it's okay for me it's okay that if I experience these attractions, big deal, I'm still putting God first and foremost thoroughly in my life, in everything I'm striving, in everything that I do, including how I truly see myself. I'm first and foremost His. I'm first and foremost a beloved child of God. See, as I began to learn the language of the church, I realized retrospectively again that it was, beforehand, it wasn't the church rejecting me, it was me rejecting the church. With those prior attachments to that way of seeing myself, describing myself, defining myself. And letting the narratives attached to those labels dictate my path to joy. And ultimately, I can see now in my case that it was more about me than God. But today, of course, I know the church is wide open for people like me or anybody. And when you walk through those doors of the church, I mean, we're all called to holiness. We're all called to grow in the fullness of virtue. And that'll happen in God's time. I mean, you can't just turn a jet around in like a second. You know what I mean? My jet took, like 10 years. Okay, more than that. Anyway, in the church here, I found that we're all welcome to pursue that holiness and dying to self, like Jesus did. And when I say dying to self, by the way, it sounds really bad, like we're at a good, uplifting conference. What I really mean is full abandonment to the Lord, okay? So think of it like that, but it is involved with dying to self. This transformation of heart for me began with the pursuit of a mystery. And that was motivated by the pursuit of deepening self-honesty, which of course was triggered by people like you. But I realized that, and we've all realized, that people I know have come back home, but self-honesty doesn't need to end at attractions and inclinations. There's so many bigger questions for us to be honest about, like identity and how do we fit into this world? What is the natural order of things? What are they gonna dig up for me? No matter how much I wanted to be a girl when I was little. What is that? As harrowingly sobering as it was to say, I came to realize that when I die, my opinions die with me. But it was by the grace of God that my heart was cracked open. And after years of pursuing a heart of virtue, I'm not looking back. I don't wish to be the dog who returns to the vomit of the unchaste lifestyle pattern that I had, or the fear and the running that I used to have. Those were not good days. High anxiety, man, that was high. So anyway, in the church, me and others are coming home, and we look forward to living magnanimously open to what God might have in store. Most importantly, we have hope. Now, 3 more quick points here about having to do with hope specifically, because I think that you guys are encountering people with the Lord, and so maybe you might encounter someone like me who needs you. Number 1, as a result of this hope from pursuing heart of virtue with the supportive community of people who are walking alongside me towards holiness, I'm beyond the box. I'm beyond the red car now. And I'm free of the fear and despair that was all contained in that. You guys saw the text from the email from my dad. What do I have to be afraid of? That was a big one. even though he was always been a loving father. It was just the fear of that, facing that. Second thing, I have knowledge now that even though these experiences are part of my story, they don't automatically exclude me from holy vocation, and that could include marriage, that could include marriage to the church or an opposite-sex spouse. There may be other reasons why I might not be admitted to a seminary or whatever, and that's fine. Like other things about my life and being, that's fine. But in and of themselves, attractions experienced on their own is not the automatic exclusion. Okay. Number 3. Oh, by the way, there's a really good book that talks about that in detail. It's called To Save 1,000 Souls. And I guess it's written for guys, but I wish every guy and girl would read it. So you girls would know the kind of stuff we wrestle with. Okay? The third thing, I have hope because I'm no longer fighting the truth that I was created a man. Honestly, just that simple. I'm not fighting with the idea that I'm not enough. Today I know that I am enough for no other reason than that God created me. It's not because I know certain people or this or I got to whatever. It's just that God created me. And that's all I need to know to be man enough. And to just fully give myself to him as much as I possibly can. Okay. So that's going to kind of wrap up the story time thing. I only have about 10 minutes left. There's just a couple of things I wanted to go a little deeper with on the evangelistic side. Because, there's lots of things in the story that are the evidence of how it all happened, but here's a little more to the point here. And I've got a pile of links to send you. Anyone who emails me or talks to me, I'll get them into your hands, okay? So, the clarity of language was important. The normalized language that permit people like me to understand that we could belong in the church, that was necessary, okay? So it wasn't just like one person was identifying that I could belong. It was the whole tide. I said it before. The tide of the church rose. It was like clarification abounded everywhere. People, and I see this all over the place, where people are talking about attractions independent of identity at the very basis. That's a good thing, because it gives people an out. I needed that window of hope to say I don't have to be this, even though I can acknowledge my attractions. There's lots of people that are coming out of the woodwork who are glad to have that clarification. They experience whatever attraction, but they're not letting that stop. They're not letting that stop them from pursuing a holy life, and they're okay with not walking into that particular identity label, and they're totally at full self-honesty with that. So there's a freedom there in them, and in that, for me, I have come alive again, as I said, in the vocation of yes, which of course may include marriage to an opposite-sex spouse or the church. And of course, who are we to judge that God couldn't author that, right? There's that who are we to judge thing. But this clarity starts with us lifting the conversation. I'll get back to the vocation of yes in a minute or two. But there's just 4 little slides of clarification. I'm not going through definitions, but just examples. This one, first slide here. So we hear about people talking about a gay or straight person, or a same-sex attracted person, or opposite attracted person. Person who is gay or straight, a person who is same-sex attracted, or a person who is opposite-sex attracted, a person with same-sex attractions, a person with opposite-sex attractions, and then the last one, person who experiences same-sex attractions. Such a subtle nuance. Look at that. Only the last one introduces the reality of non-permanence. That's how you lift the tide. You make sure that people understand the reality of non-permanence. Not that it's to say you should make it your life's mission to change from whatever. It's not about that. Pursue holiness. But you can see yourself out of the box. That doesn't happen when you tighten the language and say, you're gay, you're straight, you're trans. It doesn't happen. Clarity B. Make distinct chastity, abstinence, celibacy, and monogamy. Those terms are not the same. They can't be used interchangeably. How many times do we see secular things that they just get it wrong, right? Okay, you know what I'm talking about. That's just one example. Clarity C. Make distinct attractions experienced from an identity embraced to describe oneself. From an identity embraced to describe and define self. That's more than word alone. Because now you're talking about how someone's shifting their heart and their perspective of self. And then distinguishing that from behavioral tendencies. Okay? And this here is pretty much lifted from the To Save 1,000 Souls book. Again, the first one, big deal, whatever, right? Pursue holiness, great. But as soon as you say, this is who I am, you're exercising a choice. And that choice could be turning upside down Catholic anthropology of the person. beloved child of God first. Okay? I think this is the last one. Oh yeah, the word nature, what's natural. And it all happened, I saw a video of some news guy battling it out with some lady who said that breastfeeding was not natural, but her perspective was that it didn't feel natural to her. And he's saying, what are you talking about? Your body was designed for that. And it just goes to show the grave misunderstanding that happens when we speak about churchy things to the world. Or you guys might speak churchy things to people like me, right? So natural, a lot of people are going to automatically perceive that you're talking about what feels natural or what comes easily or what I observed two monkeys doing down in the zoo, whatever. Okay? Natural is not those things, and it is what's written into creation visibly and invisibly. Unless it's a part of nature that apple trees produce apples and not oranges. And people have pet dogs, while dogs don't have pet people. So that's the invisible. Like, it's hard to describe the invisible. You know what I'm saying? There's an order. There's an order. That's why any person would say, well, that parent, that parent should discipline the child. The child doesn't discipline the parent. That's an example of the invisible order of things, okay? Many examples. All right. So back to the vocation of yes. This is a big deal because it reveals how certain ways of approaching this topic, I think it would do us well to prayerfully examine them. And I'm talking like the people who've come back to the church. We've gone through this rigorous examination process and have come out the other end here saying, here we are, Lord, like let us serve. But I'm talking about the idea of whether or not God creates us this way. Right? This seems to be hot, always. So when I was in despair of thinking that this is all I could ever be, I was of that mindset. And God created me this way. And when I hear people advocating against the church, from the outside or within, sadly, I also hear that way of thinking. However, I have some thoughts to prayerfully invite us to prayerfully consider. I have some thoughts I want us to prayerfully consider. So these 4 things here. Neuroscience, you can read all day long about neuroscience. It points to how our brains are formed by experience and practice. I'm a school teacher. They jam educational research down our throats all the time. And every single thing about it points to this. The brains of children or students are formed by experience and practice. Everything. Everything. That LGBTQ plus activist, God bless him. I mean, he really helped me get here to serve you. But he's also written some things that make it difficult for the church in certain provinces. But even he could recognize that people aren't created or born that way. And he's not the only one. It's like this myth that doesn't die. It just... sorry, I just revealed my position, but whatever. And then furthermore, the wisdom of the church. I think this is something that all of us, might want to think about. Attractions. Its Genesis remains largely unexplained. See, Catechism, there you go. And, somewhere in the back, yeah, okay. But here's the deal. If you were to simply say that God created you that way, you're countering that catechism statement of wisdom. That's what I had to wrestle with. So if I really wanted to believe that I was created this way, I would have to be stepping outside the wisdom of the church. And that's something I wasn't comfortable with doing, especially after understanding the power over darkness that the true church really does have. I don't need to step out of the boat into the piranha-infested waters of the invisible spiritual warfare realm. You get what I'm saying? But I got there. And the other people who've come home have also gotten there. And we've said, for these reasons or other reasons that they've had, we're not going to use this idea that God created us this way. It counters a lot of things. You don't have to believe me. Just go look at it yourself. There's one other thing, and this is one of those flux capacitor moments, you know what I mean? You're on the toilet and then it just happens. Just kidding. For me to say I was created that way, I realize I'm also putting myself in alignment with what a particular movement has done to make things very difficult for the church. A lot of the movement was gain steam with that as a foundational idea. And I've come to love the church and know the church is a place for me, and I don't want to contribute to the strength of a movement that has its aim at the church. Even though some Catholics talk like that and stuff, this is just where I've come to conclude. I'm not comfortable with that anymore. In addition to all of that, saying that God created us this way, in my opinion, after having been there myself, it placed me in the vocation of no, which is really not a vocation at all. The vocation of no. And it meant that the only way I could ever be a good Catholic is if I just denied my nature, my false understanding of my nature. And I would just have to white knuckle this life of some heroic kind of abstinence, completely ignoring the wisdom that would include the idea that Jesus Christ died for us, and to follow Christ implies a dying to self. And that includes dying to the attachments that we have. And I had deep attachments to those labels. Why was I afraid to die to them for so long? So I personally didn't trust God as much as I do now, I guess. And I know this idea of that the only way I could be a good Catholic is to deny my nature. That's something that sounds horribly uncompassionate, and we get a lot of heat for that, But it's rooted in that misunderstanding of nature. That, nature is what you feel. Well, I feel really attracted, but I want to be a good Catholic, so I'm just going to white knuckle it, I've seen people talk about this. People who are close to me, these are still our brothers and sisters. It's not like an us versus them thing. These are our brothers and sisters. We love them and stuff, but they're there right now, and that's fine. I respect where they are, too. I hope they respect where I am. But one of the things that really I notice is they voiced their how to say it, despair. Some of them. And I used to be there, so I know, and I don't want to go back there anymore. So the idea of white-knuckle behavior management, of course, is honorable because you're behaving well. But I wonder if it'd be better if we had a target on holiness where behavior flowed forth as a fruit of a desire to be holy. Does that make sense? Instead of just living in this realm of managing behavior, and no one's ever going to be perfect at managing behavior, so you're bound to fail. But if you're focused on holiness, you're always one decision away of restoration. Okay? That's what we came to realize on our way home. This is what we needed to do. We had to be honest with ourselves. If we kept being locked on behavior, we would keep feeling bad about ourselves because we could never do it. We're not perfect. But if we focused on holiness, where good behavior or holy behavior came out as a fruit, we could taste success and say, yes, I am in control of this choice. And every time that I come back to God is a victory for me. It's a good way to feel good about yourself. And that whole thing, that's the crux of the whole issue that we're seeing. Some of our friends have come back to the faith. Some of them are attached to that identity, some are not. And unfortunately, that's creating a divide, and that's something that we all have to kind of wrestle with and pray for, that we can find unity on that. So I think that it'd be important for us to look at the fruits. Always look at the fruits. People are coming back home, that's good, but where is the vocation of yes? Where is the vocation of yes? Yes to holiness and virtue. Yes to accepting the wisdom of the church. Yes to an increasing desire to die to self and our attachments, including identity. And a father from back home, he said, Christianity without dying to self, if that's the way it is, something's not right. And Jesus showed us the way in that. And this is important. Those of us who are here today are here because you or someone like you led the way in that dying to self by being patient with us, not trying to give us the talk, just being patient with us in dying to your own will as well. And so much so, being patient with a peace and joy and a trust in the Lord, so much so that we wanted to taste that taste what you had. Does that make sense? Okay? You didn't talk us out of an idea. You loved us back into the Lord's arms. And that's what really this is all about. Loving someone into the arms of Jesus. Okay? So walk with people, please. That's really what it is. Walk with people in that appropriate way. Love people back into the arms of Jesus. Pursue holiness. Go to confession. Clear those lines so you can hear the Holy Spirit talking to you and what you're supposed to say or not say in that moment, right? Because there's many people like me out there in the world who need to encounter someone like you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hudson, for that amazing talk. I can't say I ever thought of myself or any of you or anyone as a square watermelon, but thank you for that perspective. But thank you so much more for just bringing awareness to us of how powerful language and labels can actually be, and for how important it is for us to continue to question things, but always to remember that ultimately we are God's children at the very foundation of it. We're still a watermelon, no matter what shape we are.
Yes, there you go.
But last but not least, thank you for reminding us that we aren't just one aspect of, as you said, a burger. We are the entirety of it, and we are beautiful as a whole. We can't look at ourselves as an aspect. So thank you. Can we get another round of applause for